The Adventure of Johnnie Waverly by Agatha Christie. You can understand a mother's feelings, Mrs. Waverly said, probably for the sixth time, gazed hopefully at Poirot. My friend, who had always been sympathetic to a mother's suffering, gave her a reassuring nod. Of course, I understand everything. Place your trust in Papa Poirot. The police, Mr. Waverly began. His wife waved her hand with a gesture of impatience. I no longer wish to have anything to do with the police. We relied on them, and you see what came of it. But I have heard so much of Monsieur Poirot and the miracles he performs that I thought perhaps he might be able to help. Poirot hastened to interrupt her effusions with a most eloquent gesture. It was clear that Mrs. Waverly was genuinely distressed, yet her feelings somehow sat poorly with the strained and severe expression on her face. When I later learned that she was the daughter of a major steel mill owner in Birmingham, a man famous for rising from a mere errand boy to the owner of the company, I understood that she was truly her father's daughter. Mr. Waverly was a large, stout, jovial-looking man. He stood with his legs wide apart, and his entire appearance and mannerisms betrayed the typical country squire. I suppose you already know all about this case, Monsieur Poirot? The question was superfluous. For several days now, all the newspapers have been full of reports about the sensational kidnapping of little Johnnie Waverly, the 3-year-old son and sole heir of Marcus Waverly, Esquire, of Waverly Court, Surrey, a descendant of one of the oldest families in England. I know the general outlines, of course, but it would be better, monsieur, if you told me everything from the very beginning and in detail. Well, I suppose it all started about 10 days ago when I received an anonymous letter of vile thing. I must admit, I didn't know what to think. Some scoundrel had the audacity to demand £25,000. £25,000, Monsieur Poirot. If I refused, he threatened to kidnap Johnnie. I threw the letter into the wastepaper basket, of course. I thought it was a silly joke. 5 days later, I received another letter, this time with a specific date. If you do not pay, your son will be stolen on the 29th. It arrived on the 27th. Ada was terrified, but I still couldn't take it seriously. This is England, for heaven's sake. No one kidnaps children for ransom here. Yes, it is not the custom here, Poirot remarked. Pray continue, monsieur. Well, Ada gave me no peace, and, although I felt like a perfect fool, I went to Scotland Yard after all. They didn't take it seriously either. They agreed with me that it was someone's idea of a stupid joke. On the 28th, I received a third letter. You have not paid. Tomorrow, the 29th, at noon, your son will be kidnapped. You will have to pay a ransom of £50,000. I took that letter to Scotland Yard. This time, they were seriously alarmed. They concluded that the letters were written by some lunatic and that, presumably, an attempt at kidnapping would be made at the appointed hour. I was assured that all necessary precautions would be taken. Inspector McNeil and his men were to arrive at Waverly the following morning to handle the matter. I went home with a sense of relief, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were under siege. I gave orders to admit no one and let no one leave the house. The evening passed without incident. In the morning, my wife felt unwell. I was concerned about her condition and sent for Dr. Ducker. The symptoms puzzled the doctor, and although he didn't quite venture to say she had been poisoned, I felt that was exactly the conclusion he had reached. He assured me there was no danger, but that it would be a couple of days before she recovered. Returning to my room after talking to the doctor, I saw a note pinned to my pillow. I was shocked and utterly bewildered. The note was written in the same hand and contained just 2 words, at 12. And then, Monsieur Poirot, I flew into a rage. Someone in the house was involved in this, one of the servants. I questioned them all, gave them a formal dressing down. They wouldn't give anyone away. My wife's companion, Miss Collins, informed me that she had seen Johnny's nurse slipping out into the street that morning. I questioned the nurse, and she confessed everything. It turns out she had left the child with a housemaid and sneaked off for a tryst with a man. Find things happening in my house. She denied pinning the note to my pillow. Perhaps it wasn't her, of course, I don't know. But I decided I couldn't take the risk. What if it was her, after all? I was certain one of the servants was involved in the business. In the end, I lost my temper and sacked the lot of them, the nurse and everyone else. I gave them an hour to pack their things and clear out. Mr. Waverly's already red face turned purple at the memory. Perhaps that was somewhat ill-timed, monsieur, Poirot suggested. Judging by subsequent events, you were likely playing into the hands of your enemies. Mr. Waverly stared at him. I didn't think of that. I just wanted them all gone. I telegraphed London to have new servants sent down this evening. Until then, only those I trusted completely were to remain with me. Miss Collins, my wife's secretary, and Treadwell, the butler, whom I have known since he was a boy. And this Miss Collins, how long has she lived with you? 1 year, Mrs. Waverly said. As a companion, she is invaluable. A secretary and a magnificent housekeeper. And the nurse? The nurse had been with us for 6 months. She came with glowing references, but I never liked her much, though Johnny was very fond of her. But when the catastrophe occurred, the nurse was no longer in the house. Monsieur Waverly, be so good as to continue. Mr. Waverly resumed his narrative. Inspector McNeil arrived at about 10:30. By then, the servants had already departed. The inspector approved of my actions. He stationed his men at every approach to the house and assured me that unless the whole business was a massive hoax, they would bound to catch the villain. Johnny was with me. Accompanied by the inspector, we went into the room we called the council room. The inspector locked the door. There was an old grandfather clock in the room. I won't deny that as the hands neared 12, I couldn't suppress a nervous tremor. The hands moved with a whir, and the clock began to strike noon. I pressed Johnny close to me. I had the feeling that this fellow might drop right out of the sky. With the final stroke of the clock, shouts and the sound of running broke out behind the door. A great commotion arose. The inspector flung open the window. A constable hurried toward him. "We've got him, sir," he announced. He was hiding in the bushes. He had prepared himself quite thoroughly. We rushed out onto the terrace, where 2 burly constables were firmly holding a scruffy-looking individual, a real bandit by the looks of him. He was struggling violently in a futile attempt to escape. One of the officers handed the inspector a bundle they had confiscated from their captive. Inside was a linen cloth and a bottle of chloroform. At the sight of it, my blood began to boil. There was also a note addressed to me. I unfolded it and read, "You'll have to pay. The ransom is 50,000. Despite all your precautions, he was kidnapped at noon on the 29th, just as I said." I burst into a laugh. It was a laugh of pure relief, but at that very second, I heard the roar of an engine and a scream. I turned my head. A long gray car was tearing down toward the south exit. The driver was shouting, but that wasn't what caught our attention. Beside him, I saw Johnny's flaxen curls. The inspector let out a string of curses. "The child was right here a moment ago," he cried. He looked around at all of us. We were all there on the terrace, myself, Treadwell, and Miss Collins. "When did you leave your son, Mr. Waverly?" he asked. I began to explain, and then, suddenly, a sound reached us that struck us all numb. It was the striking of the clock on the church tower. Cursing again, the inspector glanced at his watch. It was exactly 12 o'clock. Without a word, we dashed back into the council room. The clock there showed 10 minutes past 12. Someone had definitely tampered with it. That clock had never gained or lost a minute before. It was always perfectly on time. Mr. Waverly fell silent. Poirot smiled to himself and straightened a small rug that the agitated father had kicked askew. A delightful little problem, all mystery and shadow, Poirot murmured with satisfaction. I shall be happy to take the case. Truly, it was all quite beautifully planned. Mrs. Waverly looked at him reproachfully. But my little boy, she began to wail. Poirot's expression changed instantly. He was now the very image of compassion. He is safe, madam. He is unharmed. I assure you, these scoundrels will treat him with great care. Is he not their prize turkey? That is to say, the goose that lays the golden eggs? Monsieur Poirot, I am certain the only thing to do is to pay. At first, I was against it, but now, a mother's heart. But we have interrupted the story, monsieur, Poirot said quickly. I expect the rest is well known to you from the newspapers, said Mr. Waverly. Of course. Inspector McNeil telephoned the police immediately. Descriptions of the car and the driver were sent out everywhere, and at first, it seemed it would end well. A car matching the description, with a man and a small boy, passed through several villages heading toward London. At one point they stopped, and the villagers remembered the child was crying and seemed afraid of his companion. When Inspector McNeil announced that the car had been stopped and the man and boy detained, I breathed a sigh of relief. But you know what followed? It turned out the boy wasn't Johnny at all, and the driver was merely a devoted motorist who loved children. He had picked up a little lad playing in the street in Edenswell, a village 15 miles from us, to give him a ride in the motor car. And so, because of a crude police blunder, Johnny's trail was lost. If they hadn't wasted time on that foolish chase after the car, they might have found my boy. Calm yourself, monsieur. The police are by no means stupid. They have tried to do everything in their power. Their mistake was a perfectly natural one. The crime was very subtly planned. As for the tattered individual found in the garden, as I recall, he stubbornly denied everything. He claimed that both the note and the package were handed to him by a certain man to be delivered to Waverly Court. This man gave him 10 shillings and promised him as much again if he delivered the parcel at exactly 10 minutes to 12. He was told to go through the garden and knock at the side door. I don't believe a single word of it, Mrs. Waverly said heatedly. It is all a complete pack of lies. Yes, the version is somewhat unconvincing, Poirot said thoughtfully. And yet, the police have so far been unable to disprove it. I believe he made another statement as well. Poirot looked inquiringly at Mr. Waverly. The latter flushed again. That vagabond had the audacity to claim he recognized Treadwell as the man who gave him the parcel. According to the tramp, the man had merely shaved off his mustache. To accuse Treadwell, who was born in this village and has lived with the Waverly family all his life. Poirot was amused by the provincial gentleman's indignation. But you yourself suspected your servants of complicity. Yes, but not Treadwell. And you, madam? Poirot asked, turning suddenly to Mrs. Waverly. If someone really did foist that package on the tramp, which I strongly doubt, it was certainly not Treadwell. That little liar claimed the letter and parcel were given to him around 10 in the morning. And at 10 o'clock, Treadwell was with my husband in the smoking room. Could you distinguish the face of the man in the car, monsieur? Did he remind you of Treadwell in any way? He was too far away, and I couldn't get a good look at him. Do you know if Treadwell has a brother? He had several brothers, but they are all dead. The last one was killed in the war. I'm not entirely clear on the layout of Waverly Court. The car escaped through the south gates. Is there another exit? Yes, we call it the east gate. It is visible from the other side of the house. It seems strange to me that no one noticed the car enter the estate. There is a road running through the estate, an approach to a small chapel. Quite a few cars pass through there. The kidnapper must have stopped the car in a convenient spot, and the moment the alarm was raised and everyone's attention was fixed on the tramp, he ran straight to the house. Unless he was already there, Poirot mused aloud. Are there places to hide in the house? Well, we didn't search the house. It didn't even occur to us. No, he could have hidden somewhere, of course, but who would have let him in? We shall return to that later. For now, let us discuss something else. One must be consistent. Is there a secret place in the house? Waverly Court is an ancient building, and there might be secret rooms, a priest's hole, as they used to call them. By Jove, there is such a room in the house. The entrance is right behind a panel in the hall. Is it near the council room? Right outside the door. Voila! Poirot exclaimed. But no one knows of its existence except for me and my wife. And Treadwell. Well, you might have heard of it. And Miss Collins? I never told her about it. Poirot thought for a moment. Very well, monsieur. My next step is to visit the scene of the event at Waverly Court. Would this afternoon suit you? As soon as possible. I beg of you, Monsieur Poirot. Mrs. Waverly cried. Please, read this once more. She handed him the message from the kidnappers, which had arrived that morning, and prompted her to turn to Poirot immediately. It contained exhaustive instructions on how to pay the ransom. At the end of the letter was a clear threat. If the parents sought help from anyone, the boy would be killed. It was evident that a clear reluctance to part with money and motherly love were warring within Mrs. Waverly. The latter had won. After Mr. Waverly departed, Poirot remained alone with his wife. I must ask you, madam, for the truth. Do you also trust Treadwell, the butler? I have nothing to reproach him for, Monsieur Poirot. I cannot imagine how he could be involved, but I never liked him. Never. One more thing, madam. Could you give me the address of your son's nurse? Hammersmith, 149 Netherall Road. You don't imagine. I never imagine. I only give work to my little gray cells. And sometimes, yes, sometimes an idea comes to me. When the door closed behind her, Poirot turned to me. So, madam never liked the butler. That is something, do you not find, Hastings? I did not allow myself to be drawn into the conversation. Poirot had played tricks on me so often that I had become cautious. There was a catch hidden somewhere. Having gathered our things, we set off for Netherall Road. We were in luck. Miss Jessie Withers was at home. She was a woman of about 35, pleasant in appearance, carrying herself with confidence and dignity. Miss Withers was deeply offended by the way she had been treated, but admitted she had been in the wrong herself. She was engaged to a painter and decorator who happened to be nearby on that ill-fated day, and she had left to meet him. Her behavior seemed perfectly natural, but I didn't quite see what Poirot was driving at. He asked questions that seemed to have no bearing on the case. Mostly, he questioned her about life at Waverly Court. I grew tired of it all and was glad when Poirot took his leave. To kidnap that child was no difficult matter, my friend, Poirot remarked. We stepped out onto the road, hailed a taxi, and asked to be taken to Waterloo Station. Yes, that little lad could have been kidnapped at any moment. I fail to see how that circumstance can help us, I remarked coldly. How? Why, it is of the highest importance, the highest. And look here, Hastings, if you must wear a tie pin, At least let it be in the center. At the moment, it is at least half an inch to the right. Waverly Court was a charming old place. It had recently been restored with both care and taste. Mr. Waverly showed us the council room, the terrace, and the other spots that were in any way connected to the kidnapping. At the end of our inspection, at Poirot's request, he pressed a spring in the wall. The paneling slid aside, revealing a short passage that led into the secret room. "You see for yourselves," said Waverly. "There is nothing here." The tiny room was empty and had clearly not been entered for a long time. There were no footprints on the floor. I joined Poirot, who was intently examining something in the corner. "What does that remind you of, my friend?" He pointed to 4 small marks close together. "A dog," I exclaimed. "A very small dog, Hastings. A Pomeranian, smaller than a Pomeranian. A griffin," I suggested doubtfully. "Smaller even than a griffin. It is a breed unknown to dog fanciers." I looked at him. His face was beaming with pleasure and satisfaction. "I was right," he murmured. I knew I was on the right track. "Come, Hastings." When we were back in the hall and the secret door had closed behind us, a young woman entered. Mr. Waverly introduced her to us. Miss Collins. Miss Collins was a woman of about 30, quite brisk and alert. She had dull fair hair and wore pince-nez. At Poirot's request, we adjourned to a small sitting room, where he proceeded to question Miss Collins minutely about the servants, and particularly about Treadwell. She admitted that she did not like the butler. "He gives himself such airs," she explained. Then followed questions regarding what Mrs. Waverly had eaten on the night of the 28th. Miss Collins declared that she had partaken of the same dishes as her mistress, but had suffered no ill effects. As she was leaving, I nudged Poirot's elbow. "The dog," I whispered. "Ah, yes, the dog." He smiled broadly. "Mademoiselle, is there by any chance a dog in the house?" "There are 2 retrievers in the kennels." "No, I meant a small dog, a lapdog kept in the house." "No, nothing of the kind." Poirot let her go. Then he pressed the bell and, turning to me, remarked, "She is lying, that Mademoiselle Collins. Perhaps in her place, I should do the same. Now, let us deal with the butler." The butler did indeed have a most imposing manner. He told his story with incredible aplomb. His account agreed in every detail with what Mr. Waverly had told us. The butler confirmed that he was aware of the existence of the secret room. Finally, he withdrew, as majestic as a pope. I caught Poirot's mocking glance. "Well, and what conclusion have you come to, Hastings?" "And you?" I countered. "How cautious you have become. You will never find the solution if you do not stimulate your mental activity. But I do not wish to tease you. Let's think together. Now, what strikes one as particularly strange in this whole story?" "There's one thing that struck me," I remarked. "Why did the kidnapper leave the estate through the south gate? He could have gone through the east gate, and no one would have noticed him." "A very good point, Hastings. You have hit the nail on the head. Let's ask another question. Why was it necessary to warn Waverly in advance? Why not simply kidnap the child and demand a ransom?" "Because they hoped to get the money without taking any drastic action. But it was obvious that a mere threat would not have been enough. Furthermore, they wanted to focus the parents' attention on the stroke of 12, so that while everyone was occupied with catching the tramp, they could slip out from their hiding place and snatch the child. All that does not alter the fact that the kidnappers made life difficult for themselves. Had they not chosen a precise time and place, they could easily have snatched the boy during his walk and driven away." "Yes," I agreed doubtfully. "Instead, they play a whole drama before us. Now let us look at it from another angle. All the facts point to an accomplice in the house. First, there is the mysterious poisoning of Mrs. Waverly. Second, the note pinned to the pillow. Third, the clock being set 10 minutes ahead. Only a resident of the house could have done these things. And one more point, which you probably fail to notice. There was no dust in the secret room. Someone had carefully swept the floor. There were 4 people left in the house. We must exclude the nurse, as she could not have swept the floor, having been dismissed before the kidnapping, though she could have done everything else. So, for people, Mr. and Mrs. Waverly, Treadwell the butler, and Miss Collins. Let's start with Miss Collins. We have nothing against her, except perhaps that we know practically nothing about her, that she is a very clever young woman, and that she has been in the house less than a year. And also, as you said, that she lied about the dog. I reminded him. Ah, yes, the dog. Poirot smiled strangely. Now, let us turn to Treadwell. There are several suspicious points. First, the tramp declared that it was he who handed him the parcel. But Treadwell proved his alibi. Nevertheless, he could have poisoned Mrs. Waverly, pinned the note to the pillow, altered the clock, and swept the floor in the secret room. On the other hand, he was born and has lived his whole life on the estate. It would be highly strange if he were involved in kidnapping the son of the master of the house. It is almost too much to believe. Well, then, we must follow logic, however absurd our conclusions may seem. First, let us consider Mrs. Waverly. She is wealthy. All the funds belong to her. In fact, it is her money that restored the decaying estate. Why would she kidnap her own son only to pay a ransom to herself? With her husband, however, the situation is quite different. He has a wealthy wife, but that is by no means the same as being wealthy himself. I suspect the lady does not part with her money easily, except in extreme cases. And Mr. Waverly, as you may have noticed, is a man who enjoys the finer things in life. It's impossible, I stammered. But why? Who sent the servants away? Mr. Waverly. He could have written the notes, poisoned his wife, altered the clock, and provided an alibi for his loyal vassal, Treadwell. Treadwell never liked Mrs. Waverly. He is devoted to his master and would readily carry out any of his instructions. They managed the whole affair between the 3 of them, Waverly, Treadwell, and some friend of Mr. Waverly's. The police made a mistake by dropping the investigation into the man with the child in the gray car. He was the 3rd man. He picked up a flaxen-haired boy in a nearby village, entered the estate through the east gate, and at the precise moment drove out through the south gate, shouting something and waving his hand. No one in the house could see his face or the car's license plate, and certainly no one saw the child's face clearly. The false trail sent the police off to London. Treadwell played his part by organizing the whole business with the tramp. Had the tramp identified Treadwell without his mustache, his master would simply have confirmed his alibi, which is exactly what happened. As for Mr. Waverly, when the commotion began in the yard and the inspector rushed outside, he quickly hid his son in the secret room and followed the inspector. Later, once the inspector had left and Miss Collins was out of sight, it was a simple matter to take his son in his own car to a safe place. But what about the dog? I asked. And Miss Collins, who lied? That was my little joke. I asked her if there was a little dog in the house, a toy dog, and she replied no, meaning a real dog. Yet it is perfectly obvious that there must be a dog, a toy one, of course, in the nursery. You see, Hastings, to keep Johnny from crying and to ensure he remained quiet, Mr. Waverly left several toys in the secret room. Monsieur Poirot, Mr. Waverly entered the room. Have you managed to discover anything? Do you have any idea where the boy might be? Poirot handed him a sheet of paper. Here, is the address. But this is a blank sheet of paper. Yes, but I think you will write the address on it yourself. What the? Mr. Waverly turned purple. Monsieur, I know everything. I give you 24 hours to return the boy. With your ingenuity, you will surely find a way to explain his reappearance. Otherwise, I shall be forced to tell Mrs. Waverly exactly what happened. Mr. Waverly sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. He is with my old nurse, 10 miles from here. He has everything he needs there. He is cheerful and happy. I never doubted it. If I did not believe that you were, at heart, a good and loving father, I would not have given you this chance. But the scandal. Exactly. You belong to an old and noble family. Do not tarnish your name again. Good day to you, Mr. Waverly. Oh, and one last piece of advice. Always sweep in the corners.